Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to attend my hour/hour talk, the most common influencer marketing mistakes and how to avoid them. My name is Matt Gibson. I'm going to be your presenter today. If you're confused because you read in the program that there was supposed to be two people up here, myself and a handsome Italian guy with long flowing hair, I apologize. You're stuck with just me. Nick from iAmbassador, unfortunately, got really sick. He came here straight from Africa, landed this morning, coming in from WTM, and he unfortunately, I think he got food poisoning. I'm not even sure if he knows yet what he got, but he's too sick to come in today, and he sends his apologies because he's way more fun to listen to than me, and he feels really bad for you guys right now. So we're going to talk today about influencer marketing. If you like this talk and you want to find some notes on it, if you want to find the sources for some of our information, you're going to find it here. So what I'm going to do is, after this talk is over, it'll probably take me a day or two to get it up, but I'm going to take this slide deck. I am going to do a video where I'm going to repeat this. I'm going to do the presentation a second time with the slide deck, and I'm going to upload both the slide deck as well as the video of me doing the presentation a second time, and also links to all the resources that I have discussed, and they're all going to be right here. So you don't have to worry about taking pictures of the slides. Everything will be there for you anytime you want it. So this talk is brought to you by the Professional Travel Bloggers Association. We've done several talks here over the past years for ATM. So the Professional Travel Bloggers Association is a non-profit organization. Its mission is to help industry and travel influencer members to work together better through education, through networking, and through our influencer search engine. So our industry members are able to search for influencers that are members of our association by their blog traffic, by the niche that they operate in, by the place that they come from, where their audience is located, by the number of Instagram followers that they have, all those kinds of things, to help them work better with our members. I am currently the outbound president of the Professional Travel Bloggers Association. I'm in about my last 2 weeks as president or so. It's almost over, and there's going to be a new one soon. I am the CEO of Upthink, which is a digital agency that, among other things, helps brands to work with travel influencers. We're based out of Hong Kong. And I am an award-winning travel photographer and blogger, which is how I ended up in this mess in the first place, was because I started travel blogging about 10 years ago, way back before anybody knew what a blog was. So I think we've all heard a lot about influencers and the value that we can get from influencers. So the VP of Market Research at Twitter has said influencers can be an ROI machine. How many people stuck around here from the last talk, the Instagram talk? How many people are still here from that? Yeah. Sounded pretty good, right? I only caught about the last 15 minutes, but they were spot on. Those guys were really good. They were nailing it. And if you do work with influencers very well, you do find an amazing amount of value like that. And I'm going to get into it in a minute, why there's so much value there, and why it beats other forms of advertising, and why it's such a better value. Okay? According to Google, 4 in 10 millennial subscribers say their favorite creator understands them better than their friends do. So that's the kind of credibility that influencers can bring to a brand. According to a Twitter and analytics study, 40% of respondents purchased an item online after seeing it being used by an influencer. I've had similar experiences with many campaigns that I've worked on and that I've seen others work on, where a lot of direct sales were driven by a specific campaign by influencers, even though they were marked as sponsored campaigns. And research has indicated, according to Focusrite, who I consider to be one of the gold standards for research and for data insights, they agree that the research shows that UGC from influencers gets really good results. So, I think that we've all heard that a lot of times. Influencers get results. Influencers can have incredible value. But I think we've also heard about a lot of people having terrible experiences trying to work with influencers. So we have this weird paradox where we've heard about disasters, that people have had a bad experience, or you've heard about things going wrong, or people not understanding, people having an experience where they thought they got nothing out of it, and they don't understand why. So you hear these two different stories. You hear on one side, hey, influencers are great, like the Instagram crowd up here before. Here's all the value that we're getting out of these influencers. And then on the other side, you're hearing, I had a terrible time. This is a waste of my time. This was a waste of my money. And there's this big disconnect, and nobody kind of seems to know why that is. So we get a lot of people, or I personally get a lot of people, especially as the president of the PTBA, approach us. And they ask us, hey, can you help us work with influencers? Or I just see these people go out on their own and try it for the first time. They're like, I've heard that there's so much value in this. I need to go get an influencer tomorrow and do an influencer thing, and that's going to just work, right? And it doesn't work if you don't do it right. Like anything. And when you hear these horror stories of these people who had these terrible experiences, it's just because they did it wrong. That's all it, like, it's like anything, You don't hear that, hey, my car would work better if I changed out the exhaust system, so I'm going to go buy a set of wrenches and do a bunch of stuff to my car and think that that's going to work. And it's the same with influencer marketing. You can't just show up and grab an influencer and throw them on a trip and say, go do your thing, and expect it to work. But believe me, a lot of people do that. That's their first try, and they have a very disappointing experience, obviously. And that is why I and Nick both really wanted to come and give you this talk about the most common mistakes people make when they first work with influencers. Because they're incredibly common. And to be honest, they make sense. If you're a person who doesn't come from a background of working with influencers, these are very common ideas to have. They're things that you would sort of come up with. They're not strange ideas, but they lead to failure. So I really want to clarify these, get them out of the way, so that if you choose to work with influencers, you're going to understand why some of the common ideas that you might have going into it are incorrect, and how to avoid those common ideas that are going to lead you to failure and to be one of those people who's complaining about us. So, the common mistakes we're talking about are poor budget allocation or incorrect budget allocation. That is, assigning too much money to something that's not going to bring in enough results for the spend, or assigning too little money for a project that you have very high expectations for. Those are both going to lead to bad outcomes for you. I'm going to talk about focusing on the wrong influencers, which is very, very common. That's one thing. People get distracted by some qualities of influencers when they should be focusing on other qualities. We're going to talk about the lack of strategy and goals that people go into this with. And again, I gotta stress, I can't tell you how many times people have asked me personally, or I've seen them do this, where they say, email somebody and they say, hey, influencer, come to my place and see my hotel and do your thing. And they expect that to turn into, I don't know even what they expect that to turn into, but that is not a strategy. But it happens so often. Unclear expectations and agreements kind of stem from number 3. They're a result of number 3. If you don't have a clear strategy, you don't know what you're expecting, you don't know what you're asking for. And measuring the wrong KPIs. You're not measuring the thing that is actually an indicator of success. You're measuring something that is not an indicator of success. But we're going to start with what is an influencer. Who here has ever worked with an influencer before? Wow, nice. That was way different when I came and asked that question last year. So an influencer, we would consider them to be a blogger, a YouTuber, a Instagrammer, a Snapchatter, a WeChatter, a tweeter, anybody. The definition of an influencer that we work with at the PTBA, by the way, the PTBA does allow in all sorts of influencers. It was started and given that name when bloggers were the most primary source of influence. But we work with influencers of all kinds. So what an influencer is they're an independent online publishing entrepreneur. In the last talk, they were talking about at Daxon. I forget his name. I know his handle, but I forget his name. Is it Andrew or something? He is an independent publisher. That's what he is. He creates content. He publishes that content on Instagram, and that content reaches an audience. That is fundamentally the same if you have a blog. You're just using a different platform and publishing a different type of content. But you are an independent online publisher. You're reaching an audience that is interested in a certain topic through a certain platform. That's it. A guy who tweets about politics is the same thing fundamentally. He's just publishing in a certain number of characters or less and using a certain system to distribute his content. But fundamentally, this is what they do. And I would like to point out that they are entrepreneurs, because people often mistake them with journalists and treat them as journalists, and that's one of the fundamental mistakes. They are not. A journalist is an employee of a company. A influencer is an independent entrepreneur trying to run a business, and they don't have somebody else signing their paychecks. And that leads us to budget allocation. And that is to say, you do, like anything in life, get what you pay for. If you want to pay nothing for influencers, I can tell you about what you can expect to get back from them. So, when we think about influencers, though, it's really common to think a few things that, just because they're the way we have normally handled these sorts of situations in the past. First, a lot of people treat influencer travel trips the same way they treat press trips. And that kind of makes sense. It is what we're accustomed to in the past. A PR agency that spent 30 years running press trips for journalists, if they're asked to invite some influencers on a trip, naturally, they're going to just naturally want to do it the same way they held a press trip, but they are not the same. A press trip is one person who is trying to gather information for an article that they're going to write later. An influencer is a person who is trying to publish now, constantly, immediately, during their trip, throughout their trip. And again, I have to say, they don't have somebody else signing their paychecks. They're not going back to write a story for a magazine that's going to pay them for it. They are not getting paid for that. Okay? Second very common misconception, and a very understandable misconception, is like, hey, I am asking this influencer to come to take my tour. I'm paying for their tour. This is a really expensive tour. This is like a $3,000 tour. You're getting your flights paid for. Isn't that payment enough? That's an amazing experience. So many people would love that experience. But that is not true. Travel is not payment for work. Remember, these people are entrepreneurs. And the other problem with allocation of budget is, of course, people are hesitant to invest in something that they haven't tried before, that they haven't seen success with before, and it feels risky if you haven't done it before. There's no other way to get over that, I guess, except to say if you decide to do this, you're going to have to commit. If you want to see success, you're going to have to invest a certain amount of money in order to make it work for you the way you want it to work for you. So the right things you're going to want to do, rather than treating it like a press trip and treating this like it's a bunch of journalists coming in who are going to go write about you after, you want to treat it like you're hiring a contractor. For example, with a press trip, you would email many journalists from different publications because you just know you want to see your tour company or your destination featured in that magazine. That makes sense. With an influencer, that doesn't make quite as much sense because you're going to have a business relationship with this person. And if you're going to hire somebody, which is what you are doing, who here hires any employees without interviewing them first? Who's ever hired an employee without interviewing them? Because I've gotten hired dozens of times, more often than not by email, by people who have never met me, to the point where I don't accept a job now if we can't talk first on Skype and have a meeting to make sure that we're on the same page. I will just not accept a job because not hiring a person and treating this like they're hiring a contractor is a great way to end up with somebody that you hate, that you're now working with, and that you now have a contract with that you're following through on. Just like anything, you have to treat them like a contractor and interview them. Make sure that you're a good fit. You can't treat the travel like it's payment. That, in the very, very most occasional case for extremely highly desirable destinations, can work, such as Galapagos, Antarctica, Bhutan. Those are 3 places that come to mind where people will often forego payment because they value the idea of going to that place so much. But I don't think any of you guys come from those places, so chances are you're going to have to pay an influencer if you want them to be invested in doing a job well for you. If you don't want to hire somebody who works for money, okay, well, I guess to compare it to something, if you want somebody to fix your car, would you hire somebody, would you even let somebody work on your car who offered to do it for free because they were really interested in cars? Then you probably don't want an influencer marketing your brand just because they're super interested in travel and willing to do it for free because they're really interested in travel. It's an apt comparison. That's the quality difference that you're looking at between somebody who works for free and somebody who you're going to pay. I think it's easy to see why the person that you pay is probably going to be worth the money. And then you have to invest appropriately. This is a little bit of a harder one if you're not familiar with the influencer marketing market because you don't know what the usual rates are. You don't have an understanding of what people are normally paying for these things. There are people out there, though, like myself, like Nick, who is supposed to be up here, like the PTBA, who helps our members with these sorts of things all the time, who do know that. And this information is available. The benefits of this, as opposed to, say, a press trip, what you get out of this that you don't get out of a press trip are, you get guaranteed coverage. Okay, you're going to have a contract with somebody that guarantees a certain amount of coverage, and that is also going to be based on case studies that you've looked at of their work before, so you know what you're buying. You know where your money is going before you spend it. You get on-brand messaging, which is not a guarantee you get with a publication. With this, you get to interview a person, make sure they're on the same page with the message that you want to send, that aligns with their values, that they are going to be interested in conveying the message that you're trying to convey. You get that control. You get control over the timing of the publication. You don't have an editor at National Geographic Travel deciding when this article is going to come out, if it's in the middle of peak season, when it does you zero good at all because you're at 99% occupancy. You can make sure that this comes out at the beginning of the buying season when you know that people are searching for their summer vacations online and they're trying to choose where to go. You get that control. And normally, as part of the deal, you will also walk away with owned media assets that this person has produced, such as photographs, written text, or video. Drone video is a great example. Most influencers are running around with drones now, and they are more than happy to include that footage in a contract for the appropriate payment. So, mistake number 2, focusing on the wrong influencers. This is where most things go very, 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 very wrong. And it's a really easy mistake to make. These are very simple things that people guess. That more traffic to a website means that website is a better place for your brand to be. That's a very simple thing that most people would assume is correct, and it is not correct. It is that more followers on an Instagram account or on a YouTube channel means that is a better channel or Instagram account for your brand to appear on. Again, a very common sense assumption to make. Don't blame people for making it, but it is not correct. Audience size equals influence. Once again, very, very common thing to think. It's, if you don't live in this space, it's an assumption most people will naturally make, but it's also totally wrong. So, here's what is correct. Brand fit is the number one, first and last thing that determines if a person is even worth considering for a campaign. Okay? Doesn't matter how many followers they have in the world. If it's not a good brand fit, if their values don't align with your brand values, then it's automatically a no. They're just out. It doesn't matter if they have 1 million followers and 1 million subscribers on YouTube. They're out. That is a deal breaker. That is the first thing. Okay? And I liken this to, people look at websites and they look at website traffic the way, and they confuse it with magazine subscribers, right? If a magazine has a circulation of 20,000 a month, that means they're reaching 20,000 people a month with every issue. That we have like this hangover of the way we think about stuff from the magazine days. If a website gets 20,000 visitors a month, that is not necessarily better for you than a website that gets 1,000 visitors a month. And I will explain why. With a website, volume tends to be equivalent to total traffic, all right? So, a website that has 20,000 visits a month, but also has 20,000 pages, is getting an average of 1 view on every page per month. A website with 1,000 visitors per month, but 10 pages, is getting an average of 100 visitors on each page per month. If you're paying to have one of those pages, one obviously has a much better value for you. And this is a huge flaw that people have when they look at websites and website traffic, is that they just equate it with the same thing as the ways magazines work with their subscribers, and it's not the same. So the size of the audience does not necessarily mean it's better for you. You want the brand fit. You'd rather have also a very highly engaged audience. A lot of people, a lot of websites will get a lot of traffic that's very unrelated to travel. I know a travel blogger in particular who is very, very famous, and I will not name this person, but that person owns very, very high search results for terms such as travel books, travel movies, and travel quotes. You know how many people who make those searches are thinking about booking a trip to Dubai? None of them. So those hundreds and hundreds of thousands of visitors a month that person is getting to those pages are useless. All right? What you want is a person that is writing about topics highly related to you, i.e. a good brand fit, and that you can see that people are engaging with them, that they're getting a lot of traction, that there's people commenting under those articles, that they're really interested in this, so that you know that if somebody reads about you on that blog, they're very likely also to be highly interested. And you want to make sure that you're getting somebody who is a professional and experienced, who that can show you, say, examples of past work that they've done. Case studies. They can show you just examples of past work, case studies, a media kit that includes testimonials from people they've worked from before, those kinds of things. The next problem is the lack of goals and strategy. This one is where we get into the weeds a bit. I had an email the other day from a person who said, hey, we are looking for some influencers in about 4 weeks. And I was like, I don't know if I can help you because everybody I know who's any good is booked. If you want to plan an influencer trip, you're going to have to start about 6 months in advance because anyone who's any good is booking their trips 6 months in advance. Then there's a lack of communication. Again, people are not interviewing. They're not getting to know the people that they're hiring. This is a problem. There is a lack of amplification. From the Instagram talk that we just had a few minutes ago, they discussed the reuse of content, the amplification of the content of the influencer on other platforms. This is a key component of an influencer marketing campaign that most people miss. Okay? They don't include it as part of a broader marketing plan, and they don't have a proper measure of success. These are all things that are necessary if you want to execute a successful influencer marketing campaign. So, what you do want to do is have 6 months to 1 year of lead time. Second, you want to have the influencer participate with you in the planning of the campaign. That is to say, you want to sit down and have a couple meetings where you talk to them and say, look, this is our message that we want to get out. What is the best way for us to do that with you? Which of these things that we're trying to say will work best for your audience? And how can we create an experience that's going to best show that visually through your Instagram or on your YouTube channel or through your blog? What's going to work optimally for both of us to give you the tools to really, really nail this for your audience? This part is key. This is the step that everybody skips, and it's the step that brings the most possible value. Using strategic promotion is really important. Now, not everybody has the ability to do this. Not all of us have the resources necessary to do this. But if possible, at the very least, when you have an influencer on a trip, and I can't tell you how often people don't do this, you pay to bring an influencer out, they're at your place, they're at your resort, or they're in your destination, they're posting on Facebook and tagging you in it, and the Facebook page doesn't share it. Or they're posting on Instagram and tagging you in it, and you're not reposting it. I don't even know why you hired them in the first place if you didn't want to take that content and reshare it on your own social channels. It's free content that you've already paid for. But It is so common. I would say probably half of influencer campaigns I see going on right now run by destinations, this does not happen. And that's the bare minimum. After that, we can talk about how you can pay to push that out to your target audience on Facebook with some really, really, really cheap paid ads. Or how you can pay to promote it on YouTube with some really, 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 really cheap focused paid advertising on YouTube. I did a campaign in Calgary 3 years ago that was for drive-in traffic for people from around the area, which is where my hometown is. My aunt still emails me every year. She still gets that same ad showing up in her YouTube pre-roll with me in it because they keep using that content over and over and over and over for that same purpose. Okay? And that's also was part of a complementary campaign. That particular Calgary campaign was 3 influencers. They were seeking drive-in traffic from around the area. So they were all people from around the area. I was the guy who did the adventure thing. They did a video of it that went on YouTube that they now use to advertise that every year at the same time when they got the same people coming. Then there was one food guy. There was a food blogger because he focused on that. They use that one still. And there was a third one was a family blogger. And they did the exact same thing with her. And they used the 3 of us to target different market segments, and they're using that content over and over and over. They paid us for it once, but they're getting years and years and years of value out of it. This is where it starts to get really, really valuable to work with influencers. Now we come to, again, this is a tough thing for people who don't live in this world and don't work with influencers all the time. But people often come into these things with unrealistic expectations, and they have unclear agreements about what a person is going to do for them. So again, they don't have a face-to-face meeting to talk about what they are agreeing on. They don't define a clear set of deliverables that an influencer is going to give them at the end of the campaign. They don't give the influencer deadlines. So the influencer sometimes will end up publishing months later or too early. You're not telling them when you want to see the content come out that's ideal for you. And oftentimes it's an email negotiation that has no contract. These people haven't spoken, they haven't signed a contract with you, yet somehow they're willing to invest thousands of dollars in this person they've never met and haven't signed an agreement with and haven't defined what the agreement is. It happens surprisingly often. So I feel a little bit like I'm teaching kindergarten when I say to these things because they're pretty obvious, but they happen all the time. So you want to do some collaborative planning with the influencer. Like I said, work with them to figure out what's going to get your message out the best. Define the scope of the work. And now when I say the scope of the work, and when I write for an influencer contract for my agency, it's going to include X number of blog posts. Those blog posts are going to be X number of words. They're going to include X number of images at a minimum. You're going to produce X number of videos. Those videos are going to be X minutes long at a minimum. You are going to do X number of Instagram posts or stories or both, X number of Facebook posts, X number of tweets. Okay? Exact numbers so that there is no unclarity that what they owe you is what they owe you, and they're not getting their check until they have checked those boxes. That has to be part of it. Oh, and often included in that is media collateral for yourself. If you want photos of some new facility that you have or a new destination that you're promoting. I did another one with Tourism Calgary where they had this river surfing communities, guys who go out and surf on the river in the middle of winter, which is a little nuts and just a little Canadian, but they do it, and I like surfing. But I knew they didn't have collateral about it so a different time I went over there. I said, hey guys, I'm pretty sure you don't have pictures and video of this. how about I come over, I write a blog post, and I'll get you those pictures and video because it's a really cool story. I know you want to promote that. They were like, sure, let's do that. And we did. So it's great. You can get this stuff. So if you want that collateral for something, you can put that in the contract. You're saving yourself the cost of hiring a photographer or a videographer another time to build that collateral out. You have to have a clear timeline, obviously, for a job to be finished properly, and a detailed contract which you both sign, so that if there is ever any, disagreement about what needs to be done and when, you have a document you can refer to. And I hate to say this, because it does seem so obvious, but at least half of the people out there doing influencer campaigns that I see don't do these such basic things. They really, really do say, email a guy who they think has a good blog, say, hey, come do your influencer thing, I will pay you, and they spend a bunch of money, and then they let the person do whatever they want, and then they wonder why they didn't work out the way they expected it to. And they never did any of these things, but they seem confused as to why they're disappointed. So last, mistake number 5 is the wrong KPIs. So again, it's very, very common to say the biggest numbers are the best numbers, and they're not. That reach is a more desirable thing than engagement because it's a larger number. That views are more important than positive responses, and that you're going to get a bunch of immediate inquiries, and that's a reasonable thing to measure. Those are common misconceptions that people have that lead to disappointment. These are the things that are the right things to measure. First, the biggest numbers are not the best numbers. Who here has ever seen a report on an influencer campaign that showed some massive number in the millions that said we got a reach of like 40 million? Who's ever seen that? Okay, that is a bullshit number. Useless. Absolutely useless. It means nothing. Everybody uses it because it's the biggest number that they have, and it looks the best on a report that you give to your boss, that gives to their boss, that gives to their boss, and it has zero correlation to the effectiveness of the work that you have just done. Unfortunately, the useful number is much smaller. You're looking at indicators of influence. What reach means, does anyone here know what reach means? It basically means impressions. It means on Twitter, I know that this showed up in 40 million people's feeds. Doesn't mean I know they looked at it. Doesn't mean I know that they cared about it. Doesn't mean I know they read it. Doesn't mean I know they even saw it. Just means it showed up in that many feeds. That's what that number is. Useless. Okay? Indicators of influence are engagements. Engagement shows that somebody has seen it, they have read it, and that they like it, okay? If you're going to look at somebody's Instagram account, I can tell you a very easy way to show you a great way to find an Instagrammer who will be the best possible value for you. I right now have about 40,000 followers on Instagram, okay? I have many friends, around 200,000-300,000. It's a very natural thing on Instagram, though, that as you get bigger and bigger following, the percentage of followers who see your content and engage with your content goes down. It's just a normal part of Instagram life. I will, on occasion, have a week where I'll have a really good run of a week. I'll get an average of about 2,000 likes per post. My friends with 200,000 followers will, in that same week, get 2,500 likes per post. Okay? And I charge a quarter of what they do because my following is less than 1/5 of theirs. If you want to find somebody who's a really good value for you, don't look at the number of followers. The number of followers is the worst way to gauge the quality of an influencer. Look at the average number of likes per post on their last 20 posts. That is what you're paying for. You're not paying for 300,000 people who may or may not have followed him, or may not be bots that he bought from a Russian like bot farm. Okay? Look at the number of likes per post, because that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the people who saw it, who engaged with it, and who you can prove engaged with it. Unfortunately, when you're creating a report that you're giving to your boss, and your boss is giving to your boss's boss, or they're giving to a board of people who don't understand this stuff, 40 million reach looks really good, right? Rather than an average of 2,000 likes per post. But if you are serious about doing this and being effective and measuring the thing that you actually want to measure, you're looking at the engagements. And if you want to get nitty gritty and you really want to compare influencers, I do this for my clients whether they want it or not, or 9 times out of 10, they don't even understand what it is. They hire 20. We did this in Kyrgyzstan in the summer. We had 20 influencers on a campaign. Every single one of them, including the 200,000 follower person that I mentioned and myself, we broke down every person's payment and we broke it down into cost per engagement. How much did you, my client, pay for each engagement from that influencer versus that influencer versus that influencer? And then you see a huge variation where some influencers you're paying 75 cents for every engagement, and on some you're paying 5 cents per engagement. Now we're starting to see who's going to have real effectiveness for you if you're looking for somebody to work for in the future. Some people are delivering much greater value, and the trend, as has been mentioned in some of the talks earlier today, is toward micro-influencers, not the huge ones, but the smaller ones who are very well targeted towards your niche. That's where you're finding the people who are getting you a very low cost per engagement. So, we originally, when I was supposed to be joined by our handsome Italian friend, we were going to have 2 case studies for you, one small and one large, to give you a feeling about how this scales for smaller tour operators up to really big destination marketing organizations with different budgets. Unfortunately, he's not here, so I'm just going to do the small case study for you, which is one of my own. So this one, I went to a place called Kalispell, Montana. Who's heard of Kalispell, Montana? No way. Okay, well, that's rad. One person has. Kalispell is a tiny place in Montana, about 5 hours from where I grew up in British Columbia. And they had invited me to come and work with them on an influencer campaign. They were new to this. They are not well known. They have a very small budget. So it was a 1 influencer trip. I was their first influencer ever. So, they were very willing and open, though, to talk about how to do it, which was nice because I obviously have strong feelings about what the right way to do this is. So we had about a 4-month lead time before the trip. We had, leading up to the trip, 3 telephone meetings where we talked about what's going to work best. What is your message, Kalispell? What is, that's the first thing I ask. I'm like, what are you trying to get me to tell people? And they said, well, we are between Glacier National Park, which is very famous. We're just around the corner from a very well-known ski hill. Actually, 2 very well-known ski hills. These things are all in our neighborhood, but they're not in Kalispell. But they're all close by. They're all around us. So we're kind of in the middle of them, and we want to tell people that we want to point this out to people, that we're the hub, right? And that's why I called it way out in the middle of somewhere. So we talked about their messaging. We talked about the things I could do that would fall in line with my personal brand and my messaging that would also work with their messaging. We negotiated the details of the trip. We agreed on deliverables. I sent them a contract. We set deadlines, and we signed our contract. So the trip turned out like this. They flew me in. They paid my expenses. They were the local CVB, so I assumed that the hotel and stuff was donated. I had a simple hotel. It was totally not fancy because I only write about adventure. That was part of our conversation. They could have sent me to their nicest hotel, which is a normal thing to do. But when we talked, I said, I only write about outdoors activities. I write zero about hotels ever. I don't care where you put me. I'll stay at a campground. I don't mind that. That's my style. I'm not a luxury person. So they were like, fine, cool. We'll just put you up at the Motel 6 or whatever. They were like, just put me in a normal place. And I was happy with that. Perfectly fine. Because that wasn't the point. They actually, and this is unusual, they actually didn't have somebody showing me around. They just gave me a rental car and an itinerary. And we're like, go ahead. Yeah, no, it was really rad. Oh, during the planning stage, too, I told them, I was like, look, I know I want to do these activities, right? And these activities are really cool. It's going to be fun. You know, you see a list. I did rafting, stand-up paddleboarding, hiking, exploring. And they made the plans for me to do all those things and the appointments for me to do those things. But I asked them, I was like, look, I come from a small town. You're a small town. And one thing that you don't get, though, is like, you know, a place is not a story. And an activity is not a story. A person is a story. And a person is that place. And I was like, I love these things and I want those things, but can you also set me up with some interviews with, I know you have them, you're a small town. Some of those quirky people in your small town that know a lot about the history, that are just kind of neat or unusual or different or interesting. Can you just let me meet some of those people and just help to introduce me to have dinner with them or something? Because those people are really the way to tell the story of a place, are those awesome people that kind of define the place. And they did. She organized for me to meet some of these people. So they gave me the plans, the recommendations, a car, and they left enough time for me, and this actually got really important. They left enough time for me to go out and just like drive around on my own in the car to go find the things that I wanted to find. So as it turned out, one of the quirky guys they introduced me to, I wish I had a picture of him now because he's really cool. He's a farmer who raises Tibetan yaks in Kalispell, Montana. So dope. Yeah, really cool, interesting guy, knows the history better than anyone. He knows the whole history of the area. Totally like, you know, what you would imagine of a Montana sort of cowboy, farmer, rugged individualist sort of fellow, who is also the head of their local conservation society that was building out a network of parks called, it was Peak to something, I forget. They were building this, connecting this area of public and private land that was going to be conserved for about 100 miles from end to end, and they were building out this conservation like corridor. And that was a project he was working on that he showed me. So one of the wonderful things that happened was when I met him at his yak farm. He showed me the beginning of this conservation area that starts in one place, and it has a trail network that ends 100 miles down the road. And because I had the time and because I loved that idea of the story, it wasn't something we planned, but I had the freedom to drive one day down to the other end so that I could see the other end of that trail and take a bunch of pictures of where that trail ended so that I could talk about this trail network properly that he had told me about, and I had that freedom. So this is what we got out of it. We had planned, the deliverables were 2 blog posts, 48 social media posts, 20 high-resolution photos for them to use as they wished, all right? I ended up doing 57 social media posts. These are the results. 20 blog posts got 22,000 visitors. From their target market, I promoted those blog posts fairly heavily in the area. Again, they're looking for drive-in traffic. The total was 1,900 hours of viewing time at 5 minutes and 10 cents per visitor. For fun, I made a comparison. It's not an exact comparison. But if you read some studies about, say, a full-page ad in National Geographic Traveler or Outside Magazine or Afar, the average person will look at that for about 3 seconds, okay? And if you assume that a magazine is going to be read 3 times, that's 9 seconds that every magazine with a full-page ad is going to get a viewership, right? If you take that and you take the cost of the magazine and you look at 9 seconds per magazine multiplied by their base rate, which is the number of subscribers they guarantee will get that magazine, if you take the cost of that ad, divide it down to a per second price, you're paying about 2 cents per second of viewership. This at 2 cents per second of viewership worked out to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000. I wasn't going to talk about this because I thought, Nick would have to talk about the price of his campaigns. I charged them $2,000 for this. And by that estimate, which is a rough estimate to be sure, it's definitely not super accurate, but that comes out to $25,000 in value. They got 57 blog posts with more than 30,000 interactions. And they got 20 high-resolution photos. Here are a few examples which they got to keep for themselves. You will notice the Tibetan yak. Oh, I can't hit it. Yeah, they got 20 photos to keep for themselves forever to use as they see fit for their marketing purposes. All right? So now that was several years ago. I wouldn't charge $2,000 for that now, but this is what you get out of micro-influencers. There are other people who would charge that much. That was 4 days' work. That's $500 a day. That's not the worst pay in the world. For a vacation, for a trip that I genuinely liked and got to design with them, that's not too bad for me. So that is, in my opinion, quite good value. But you don't get that value if you don't plan it properly. So unfortunately, Nick's not here to give his other case study. So we have a bit of time to take any questions if you guys have any questions. Does anyone have any questions about this? Sure. I got a second mic. I'll play mic guy for it. Yeah? Here, you can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Marilyn from Shangri-La Hotels.
Hi.
I have a question mainly on the ROI and you explained a bit how you compare with paid advertising in magazines, but is there a way to put like a clear figure on ROI on this kind of influencers campaign? Because it's always a bit the struggle that when we want to justify investing in that, because we have no real direct booking links and immediate value. It's more long term, as you say, but
sure.
If we need to show any ROI, how could we justify this?
Okay, there are a few ways, but I'm going to have to ask you some questions. All right? So now, obviously, Shangri-La Hotels does public relations, yes? Mm-hmm. And how do they show the ROI of that?
By advertising value equivalence?
Yes, yeah. Yes. So that's one way you can start. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't have a perfect, the PR formula is not perfect, but we have somewhat equivalent ways of measuring the equivalent advertising value. And I just described one very imperfect way that I did by comparing it to a magazine ad. Nobody has yet come up with a really good way to compare it to say, I can't compare it to the cost of sponsored post placement on nationalgeographic.com, for example, or because I can't look at a post there and say, when you put a post there, it gets this many views. They don't give you that information. Though I'm actually talking to their special projects guy about maybe working on that together. What you could do, though, say it's a YouTube thing. Say you're working with a YouTuber and a YouTuber gets a certain amount of video views. You can look at the cost of a pre-roll ad on YouTube that costs 30 seconds for X number of dollars. Then you have an equivalent advertising value that is equivalent. It's a little harder with blogs. It's not perfect, but we're getting there. The other thing that you can do is add a special offer to the post or to whatever you are doing with the blogger, a special offer that they can extend to their readers with a specific coupon code or with a trackable link that gives their readers a little bit of value, but enables you to track also some direct bookings or direct reactions that have come from that. So there's kind of a mix of ways. It's not perfect. It's about as perfect as PR, but it's there.
Thank you.
Yep. And I believe somebody else had a question. Yes?
Hello, Matt. I represent Dubai Tourism. I would like to ask you the risk of working with influencers. Logan Paul, for example. How can you mitigate the risk, and how to make influencer marketing safe and transparent?
So can you repeat the question?
What is the risk of working with influencers?
Okay, well, the risk that you're talking about, Logan Paul, actually that brings up something I'm glad that you reminded me of. I'd like to really clarify something. It came to this occurred to me when I was at influencer conference speaking in Iceland last winter. There were some guys there from a group called High on Life. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're Canadian guys, got arrested in Yellowstone National Park because they jumped over a fence and went and walked around an extremely sensitive natural area, went to jail for it. Kind of their claim to fame. That was several years ago. People forgot. Now they're back, and they were at this conference. They're nice guys, actually. They're really nice guys. They're really smart guys, actually, at marketing. But it occurred to me while we were sitting there in a coffee break, they went running past us into this big empty space in the hall to practice backflips because they wanted to do a backflip on stage. And you talk about Logan Paul, and I'm talking about High on Life, there's risks. First, it's on the brand. That's why I'm talking about interviewing people before you work with them. Absolutely. Like, please interview them, because 9 times out of 10, you'll get rid of a Logan Paul by doing that. Second, we need to understand that there is a difference between getting influence and getting attention. Logan Paul gets a lot of attention. I don't know if people look up to him for decision-making reasons, if they're older than 12. Same with the High on Life guys. A backflip on stage is a great way to get attention. Fantastic attention. I wouldn't say that it makes me think that I want to I trust their judgment when they're telling me about where I should go travel to. So there's a difference. And that's what I talk about when I talk about these people with enormous numbers. A lot of them are extremely good at getting attention, but not. And I don't want to sort of talk down about the Instagram campaign you were talking about with Daxon, the animal guy. But one thing that occurs to me about him is that he posts pictures of cute animals, and if I looked at his analytics, I'm willing to bet that half of his audience is under 15. They're not buying travel to Dubai, or they're not buying travel anywhere else. Which doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you got to know, understand what you're paying for. And so he is a very well-known influencer, and I wouldn't speak poorly of him. He's a fantastic guy, and he does a very good professional job everywhere that he goes. I would just say this is, attention versus influence is an important thing, and you need to know who you're hiring and why you're hiring them. And that is how you minimize the risk. And if you do that, or you hire somebody like myself or like Nick, who was supposed to be here, you can almost guarantee that there is no risk, because these are people we've known for 5-10 years, and we work with them on a regular basis. It's just, what we're here for. Does anyone else have any questions? And this, I guess it'll be the last question, because I think it's time's up here. Did you still have?
My bad. I'm James. I just got a question that I'm pretty sure most of the marketing teams that work in a hotel pretty much have in their mind. You said at one point that normally with good bloggers or influencers, the good ones are often the ones that are paid for. Now, from a hotel perspective, I too have a value that I place on my room, that I place on my F&B, and all that kind of thing. Now, this, to a certain degree, equates to the cost of paying for the blogger to a certain extent. Now, at the same time, I might get the same value from the same blogger or influencer that I work with. Is there a specific reason that you think it has to be paid for and not like on a barter basis kind of a thing?
Yes, I mean it does depend a lot on what your goal is with that influencer, of course. Hotels are in a really unique situation when it comes to this. For a lot of reasons, hotels have a very unique situation, as with social media marketing, as they do as well. But the main reasons, the first and most primary reasons why you want to pay somebody is, first, even if it's a small stipend, you now have an agreement with them. You have a paycheck that you can hold if they do not complete the agreement. If you don't have a payment involved, you have a very weak contract with that person and a very weak agreement that it's very easy for them not to deliver on. If you're not paying somebody, again, we'll go back to the car analogy, you wouldn't let somebody work on your car for free just because they really like cars. If you want influencers to say, write about your hotel just because they like nice hotels, you're looking at sort of a similar situation in terms of quality, in terms of professionalism, in terms of knowing what they're going to deliver. And it's not always, in a hotel's case, I understand that it's very hard to justify paying an influencer. So generally speaking, you're going to want to work with them in a way that goes beyond the simple, I would like to hear you write about my room in exchange for a room sort of a thing. In a lot of cases when I've seen hotels paying influencers, it also involves some sort of an exchange of collateral, such as copy for the websites, for the hotel's website, such as local guides around the area, something that I've done before, photography, takeovers of the Instagram account to help the hotel grow their Instagram account. Usually there's some sort of a value add involved when they are being paid, but that is usually why they are being paid. And it usually works out to be a better value, in my opinion, if they are paid and worked with in that way, because you get a better quality of person, you're attracting a better quality of influencer, and you have more control over the relationship if you are paying. I don't know if that's a super clear answer, because it does get into a lot of details about your specific situation and what you're looking for, but those are sort of the general points. Yeah. So I think that's all the time that we have here. I think we're done. I'm a few minutes over, so thank you very much for coming, you guys. And if you have any more questions, I will be around until Wednesday, so please come. Feel free to take my card, send me a text, or send me an email if you want to follow up and ask some more questions later.